girl walked slowly through the dusty streets, her small bare feet leaving faint marks on the ground. The sun was already high, making the old buildings around her cast long shadows that gave the streets a gray and heavy look. She clutched a small, worn-out bag close to her chest, hoping that she could finish her small errands before the day became too hot. Every step she took seemed heavy, but she had learned to keep moving, no matter how tired her little body felt. Life had taught her to be careful and quiet, and she had become almost invisible in the busy streets of her neighborhood. She had passed the bakery where the smell of fresh bread made her stomach growl. She remembered that she had only a few coins left and had to save them for her family. Hunger was something she had learned to ignore most of the time. Her mind was busy thinking about the chores she had to finish before sunset and about the tiny joys she could find in her small world. Even though she had very little, she found happiness in small moments, like a cool breeze on a hot day or a smile from a stranger who noticed her trying her best. As she turned a corner, she saw something unusual. There, in front of a small cafe that most people walked past without noticing, stood an old piano. Its paint was chipped, and some keys looked like they might break if pressed too hard. But to her, it was beautiful. She stopped and stared at it for a long moment, her heart beating faster than it had in a long time. She had always loved music. Even with no lessons or teachers, she had learned to hum melodies she heard from street performers or radios. Music was her escape, a way to speak when she had no words. Curiosity and excitement pulled her closer. She reached out to touch one of the keys lightly, almost afraid it would disappear if she didn't move carefully. It made a soft sound that was far from perfect, but it made her smile. For a moment, she imagined playing a full song, one that could make people stop and listen, one that could make them forget about their busy lives. She didn't know if anyone would ever hear her play, but the thought made her heart feel warm. Suddenly, she heard giggles from a few children who had been watching her from the corner of the street. They were older than her, bigger, and full of confidence. "You? Play that piano? That's a laugh!" one of them shouted, pointing at her. Others joined in, laughing louder, some of them even rolling on the ground, holding their stomachs as if what they were seeing was the funniest thing in the world. Some adults nearby also smirked, shaking their heads as if to say, "She doesn't belong here." The girl felt her cheeks burn. She had felt embarrassment before, but this was different. This was a group of people judging her in front of everyone. She wanted to run away, hide somewhere safe where no one could see her small, trembling hands. But then she looked at the piano again, at the keys that seemed to wait for her. Something inside her told her not to run. This was her moment, her chance to show herself that she could do something wonderful even if others didn't believe in her. She took a deep breath, feeling the warm air fill her small lungs. Her hands hovered over the keys, unsure of which to press first. She remembered how she had practiced in her mind, imagining the music flowing through her fingers. She closed her eyes for a second, letting the memory of songs she had heard float in her mind. The world around her, the mocking children, the whispering adults, the busy streets, seemed to fade away. For a few precious moments it was just her and the piano. When she pressed the first key, the sound was soft and uncertain. She tried another, then another, slowly creating a simple melody. It was not perfect, but it was hers. She could feel the music inside her, guiding her hands. Her small fingers moved carefully, finding the rhythm and the feeling she had imagined. The crowd's laughter continued, but it was no longer the loud, mocking sound that had made her heart sink. She started to play with more confidence, letting the melody grow. People passing by began to slow down. They stopped to watch a small, ragged girl sitting at an old piano, her tiny frame almost swallowed by the instrument. Some faces showed curiosity, others surprise. No one expected such a young child, with worn clothes and dusty hair, to create anything worth noticing. But as her music continued, even the skeptical ones couldn't help but listen. There was something in the way she played that made them pause. It was not about perfection. It was about feeling, about honesty. Every note told a story of a girl who had little but had everything in her heart. The children who had laughed earlier now looked at her differently. Their giggles slowed, turning into whispers. They couldn't understand how such small hands could produce music that seemed so big and full of life. The adults, too, exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The girl didn't notice them. She was lost in her music. Her soul poured into every note, telling a story she had never said aloud. A story of struggle, hope, and dreams that refused to be crushed. Minutes passed, but they felt like seconds to her. She played with all the emotion she had stored inside, letting the music speak what she could not. She felt free, powerful, and alive. Even the birds in the trees seemed to quiet down to hear her, and a soft wind carried the melody along the streets. For once, the world seemed to pause and listen to a small girl who dared to dream. When she finally stopped, her hands resting lightly on the keys, there was silence. The crowd that had mocked her was gone, replaced by a new group of faces full of admiration and wonder. No one clapped loudly or shouted her name. They were too amazed to do anything but watch. Some held coins in their hands, unsure if they should offer them. Others just smiled, feeling the warmth and honesty that her music had given them. She took a small bow, her cheeks still pink, but her heart lighter than it had ever been. The piano had been her friend, her secret place where she could be brave. She didn't need to prove anything to the people who had laughed. She had already proven it to herself. She had found her voice, even if it was through the black and white keys of an old piano on a dusty street. As she walked away, the wind played with her hair, and the coins in her small bag felt heavier with the gift of recognition. She didn't need praise or fame. She needed the courage to keep going. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she had tasted the power of her own passion, and nothing could take that away. That day, a small girl on a quiet street had discovered that dreams could start anywhere, even in the laughter of strangers who didn't believe in her at first sight. The next morning, the girl woke up earlier than usual, her small body stiff but her mind restless with thoughts of the piano. Even though her fingers ached slightly from the day before, she could not stop thinking about the melody she had tried to play. It was stuck in her mind like a song she could not forget. She remembered the faces of the people who had laughed at her and then fallen silent, their eyes wide with surprise. She felt a small spark of hope in her chest, a feeling she had not felt in a long time. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for her to show the world who she really was. She hurried through her morning chores, finishing them faster than usual. She swept the small patch of dirt in front of her home, helped her family prepare breakfast, and even collected some water from the distant well. Every task felt lighter because she was thinking about the piano. Her imagination carried her back to the keys, the soft notes, the music that seemed to rise from nowhere and fill the streets. She could almost feel her fingers moving across them again, dancing to the rhythm she had created in her mind. When she finally reached the cafe, the old piano was still there, leaning slightly to one side as if it were waiting for her. She ran up to it, her heart pounding, her eyes bright with anticipation. The morning sun glinted on the chipped keys, giving them a soft golden glow. She reached out and touched them gently, her fingertips brushing over the cool surface. The sound that came out was softer than she had expected, but it was familiar, comforting, and filled her with a strange sense of belonging. She knew that she was not just touching a piano. She was touching her dreams. As she prepared to play, a group of children from the street approached. They were the same ones who had laughed at her before, but this time their expressions were different. They were curious, hesitant, almost afraid to interrupt her. They whispered among themselves, wondering if she could really play a song that would surprise them again. Some of the adults from the cafe watched from the windows, intrigued by the small girl and the music she seemed ready to create. There was tension in the air, a mix of doubt and expectation, and it made her pulse quicken. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. This time, she began more confidently, remembering the simple melody she had tried the day before. Her fingers moved carefully at first, then faster, as if the piano were guiding her. The sound grew clearer, richer, and more expressive. Each note carried a story, a feeling she had held inside for years. The children's giggles had not completely disappeared, but they were quieter now, replaced by whispers of curiosity. The adults leaned closer to the windows, unable to turn away from the music. She played a short song she had made up herself, something sweet and simple, but full of emotion. As the music flowed, the crowd began to change. Some people stopped walking, their eyes fixed on the small girl. They were not laughing anymore. They were listening. The melody seemed to touch something deep inside them, something that made them pause and forget their busy lives for a moment. The girl felt a thrill of joy and pride, but she also felt something else. A little fear. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed again? Her fingers stumbled slightly on one note, and she felt her cheeks flush. She paused for a moment, thinking of running away, but she looked up at the faces around her. No one laughed. No one pointed. They were watching, waiting. She realized then that the fear she had felt before was no longer stronger than her desire to play. She pressed the keys again, this time with more care, more love. The melody rose and fell, soft and sweet, powerful and gentle. She could feel the music in her chest, in her arms, in her whole being. It was alive and she was alive with it. The children began to gather closer, standing in a small circle around the piano. They whispered to each other, amazed at how someone so small could create such sound. Some of them began to move their bodies to the rhythm, tapping their feet and clapping softly. It was not mockery, it was recognition. Even the adults began to nod in approval, some smiling softly, some with eyes wide in surprise. The girl noticed this, and it made her heart swell. She had not played for them, but she had played with them, and that made all the difference. As she continued, she added small improvisations, little twists to the melody that made it her own. Her mind flowed with ideas, her fingers moved faster, but they never tripped. Each note was like a word, each phrase a sentence in the story she was telling. People stopped in the street, watching in silence, captivated by the music that seemed to pour out of her tiny frame. She could feel the energy of the crowd, but it did not distract her. It encouraged her. She played with a freedom she had never known, her imagination guiding her in ways that no lesson or teacher ever could. The song ended softly, and for a moment, there was silence. The girl's small chest heaved, and she could feel sweat on her forehead. Then, slowly, the first clap came from one of the adults. It was quiet, but it was sincere. Another followed, and then another, until the applause grew louder. The children cheered. Some clapped their hands. Some jumped up and down with excitement. The girl felt a warmth spread through her body. She had done it. She had turned doubt and laughter into admiration and joy. She had made them feel something. After a moment, the girl looked around at the faces in front of her. Some held small coins, some held nothing but their smiles and clapping hands. She did not care about the money. What mattered was the recognition, the understanding that she had a gift, a talent that could not be ignored. Even the children who had laughed before now looked at her with respect, some of them even whispering to their friends about how amazing she was. She smiled shyly, feeling a pride that was quiet but strong. The cafe owner came outside and knelt beside her. He was a kind man with eyes that seemed to understand everything. He whispered to her that she could come back any time and play, and he would make sure people knew her music. The girl nodded, her eyes wide with gratitude. She had never been given such an opportunity before. The piano, the people, the streets, they had become her stage, and she felt a spark of hope that maybe one day, she could go even further. As she packed up her small belongings and prepared to leave, she glanced back at the piano. It looked worn and old, but to her, it was magical. It had given her a voice she had never known, a place where she could express herself fully. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she had taken the first step. She had learned that even in a world full of doubt and laughter, she could create something beautiful. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She helped her family, ran errands, and even found a few moments to hum the melody she had played. It stayed with her, a reminder that she had something special inside. She felt stronger, braver, and more determined. The laughter of the past had been replaced by music and hope, and she carried that feeling with her as she went about her day. The streets seemed a little brighter, the sun a little warmer, and her heart a little lighter. When she finally returned home, she sat quietly in a corner, her small hands moving as if they were playing an invisible piano. She imagined herself on a stage, with people listening and clapping, with music filling the air. She knew that one day that dream could become real. For now, she had the melody, her courage, and the memory of the day she had played and been heard. That was enough. And in that moment, she felt that nothing could stop her. Not laughter, not doubt, not even the hardships of life. She had music, and music was her freedom. The morning air was cool when the girl stepped outside, the streets still quiet, except for the faint sound of birds and the occasional distant chatter. She carried her small bag, now lighter with hope, and her heart raced with anticipation. She had practiced in her mind all night, remembering the melodies that had flowed from her fingers the day before. Today, she told herself she would play a little longer, and maybe, just maybe, she could create something that would linger in people's hearts. The old piano stood waiting, leaning slightly against the cafe wall. Its chipped wood and yellowed keys told stories of countless hands that had touched it before, yet somehow it felt as if it were waiting just for her. She ran her fingers across the keys, and the sound was familiar, comforting, like an old friend greeting her. A small crowd began to gather, more curious than mocking this time. The children who had laughed before were there again, but their expressions had changed. There was a quiet excitement in their eyes, a sense of wonder that they couldn't hide. She sat down carefully, her small frame almost swallowed by the piano, and took a deep breath. This time, she was not thinking about the laughter or the doubt. She focused only on the music, letting her mind guide her fingers. The first notes were soft and steady, a gentle introduction to the song she had prepared. She felt the melody flowing through her, rising and falling, soft and powerful at the same time. Each key she pressed seemed to echo her own story, a story of struggle, courage, and quiet dreams. As she continued, the crowd grew larger. People stopped in the streets, their footsteps slowing as they listened to the music. The children leaned in closer, their eyes wide with awe, some moving to the rhythm, tapping their feet softly. Adults peeked from windows, some smiling, some whispering to each other about the unexpected talent of such a small girl. There was a hush over the street, a rare stillness that allowed her music to fill the space, filling hearts and minds alike. She played a song she had imagined, a melody that was simple but full of emotion. Her fingers moved faster now, more confidently, as she added small flourishes and turns, making the music her own. She could feel the rhythm in her chest, in her arms, in her very soul. The notes carried her feelings outward, reaching the people who had gathered. Even the skeptical ones could not deny the beauty of what she was creating. They watched, captivated, their eyes fixed on the girl whose small hands produced such a large and moving sound. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew down the street, rustling papers and leaves. It seemed to harmonize with her music, adding an unplanned accompaniment. She smiled, letting it inspire her, playing more freely, letting her imagination take over. The melody changed slightly, growing richer and more expressive. Each note was deliberate yet full of life. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, each movement natural, effortless. She was not just playing. She was speaking through music. A few moments later, the children who had been whispering began to cheer softly. The adults nodded, some with tears glimmering in their eyes. The girl continued without pause, letting her emotions flow freely. She played with a passion that no one had expected, her music telling the story of a small girl who had faced ridicule but refused to stop dreaming. She could see the faces of those listening, their expressions changing from doubt to wonder, from laughter to admiration. She felt proud, but it was more than pride. It was a deep, warm joy that filled her completely. As she reached the climax of her piece, the street seemed to hold its breath. Her fingers danced across the keys, fast and precise, yet full of feeling. The notes soared and dipped, creating a melody that felt alive, almost like it could step off the piano and float into the sky. People stopped what they were doing, some leaning forward to catch every sound, some closing their eyes to feel the music more deeply. The children were silent now, their earlier teasing replaced by awe. The adults watched in amazement, some whispering to each other, unable to believe what they were hearing. When the final notes faded into silence, there was a brief pause. No one moved, no one spoke. The quiet was heavy, almost sacred, as if the street itself were holding its breath in respect for what had just been played. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. First, one hand clapped, then another, and soon it became a wave of appreciation. The children cheered, some jumping up and down, some clapping their hands, and the adults smiled, some wiping tears from their eyes. The girl felt her heart swell. She had done it. She had played a song that made people feel something, that touched them in a way she had never imagined possible. The cafe owner came out again, a kind smile on his face. He knelt beside her and whispered words of encouragement, telling her she had a rare gift, one that deserved to be shared. He offered her the piano any time she wished to play, promising that the people who had gathered would always listen. She nodded, feeling gratitude and excitement all at once. This small gesture meant more than she could express. It was not about the piano or the applause. It was about being seen, about her talent being recognized and appreciated. The girl packed her small bag, still carrying a few coins given by the crowd, and prepared to leave. But before she walked away, she took one last look at the piano. It had been her companion, her friend, and her voice. She had poured her heart into the music, and it had returned to her in ways she had not imagined. She knew that she would return, not for the coins, not for the applause, but for the joy of playing, for the freedom it gave her. The rest of the day passed quietly. She helped her family, ran errands, and kept the melody in her mind, humming it softly whenever she could. She imagined herself playing in larger places, imagining stages and audiences, feeling the thrill of sharing her music with more people. The thought made her small chest swell with hope and determination. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and people who would doubt her. But she had felt the power of her own music, and nothing could take that away. That evening, as she sat quietly in her small home, she imagined the piano and the faces of those who had listened. She played invisible notes on her lap, her fingers moving as if they were dancing across the keys. She remembered the expressions of awe and wonder, the silent respect that had filled the street, and she felt a spark of something she had never known before. It was hope, the kind that burns quietly in the heart, the kind that says, no matter what, you can rise above doubt and fear. She lay down to sleep, her mind still humming with the melody, and felt a deep sense of peace. She had discovered a power she never knew she had, a way to touch the world without words. Music had become her voice, her shield, and her gift. She knew tomorrow she would return to the piano, to the streets, and to the people waiting to hear her play again. But for now, she slept with a smile on her face, dreaming of songs that had not yet been written and a life filled with the music she loved so much. It was a beginning, small but strong, and it promised a future full of possibilities. The next morning, the girl woke with a sense of excitement and determination. She had played on the street piano for 2 days now, and each day brought new confidence and hope. Today, she felt ready to try something more. She hurried through her morning chores, finishing quickly so she could reach the cafe before the streets grew too busy. Her small bag bounced against her side as she ran, her mind full of the melodies she wanted to play. When she arrived, the piano was waiting, its keys shining in the soft morning light. A few people were already walking by, pausing to see if she would play again. She approached slowly, her small fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the familiar cool touch that made her feel calm and focused. She remembered the applause from the day before, the smiles, and the quiet respect that had followed her music. It gave her courage, and today she wanted to see how far she could take it. As she began to play, the first notes were soft, gentle, like a whisper of her hopes and dreams. Her fingers moved carefully, finding the melody she had practiced in her mind. Slowly, she grew more confident, adding small flourishes and changes that made the music richer. The notes seemed to flow from her soul, carrying the story of a small girl with big dreams, and filling the street with sound. Passers-by began to stop, drawn by the beauty of the music. Children who had laughed at her before now watched quietly, their expressions full of curiosity and amazement. The song grew louder, fuller, and more expressive. She played with feeling, letting the music rise and fall naturally. People began to gather in a small crowd, some stopping in the middle of their errands just to listen. Even adults who had been skeptical before now leaned against walls and windows, unable to look away. The girl was lost in the music, her mind focused entirely on the melody she created, the rhythm, and the emotion she wanted to share. Some of the children tried to imitate her movements, tapping invisible keys in the air, fascinated by how someone so small could create such beautiful music. Adults exchanged glances, whispering in disbelief, realizing that this small girl had a rare talent. The girl felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and happiness. She was sharing something important, something that could touch people in ways words never could. Her music was speaking for her, telling the story of her life and dreams. As she continued, she added more complexity to the melody. She experimented with the rhythm, letting her fingers dance over the keys, creating sounds that surprised even her. The crowd grew more attentive, some moving closer, some closing their eyes to feel the music. A few adults recorded the performance on their phones, wanting to capture this moment, but she did not notice. She was lost in the music, fully present, her heart and mind connected to every note she played. The children who had mocked her before began to whisper to each other, their earlier laughter replaced with admiration. Some clapped softly to keep the rhythm, and soon others joined in, creating a gentle applause that encouraged her. The music had transformed the street, turning it from an ordinary morning into a space of wonder and amazement. She could feel the energy from the crowd, but instead of feeling pressured, she felt inspired. Each note was stronger, more deliberate, full of the passion she had kept hidden for so long. The song reached a powerful moment, the notes rising and falling with emotion, carrying the story of the girl's determination and hope. People around her felt the weight of the music, the way it seemed to tell a story without words. Some adults wiped tears from their eyes, touched by the purity and honesty of the performance. Children stared in awe, learning that talent and courage could come in the smallest of packages. She played with everything she had, pouring her heart into the keys, letting the melody flow freely. When the last note lingered and faded into silence, there was a pause. The crowd did not move, as if the street itself had paused to admire her courage and talent. Then slowly applause began, soft at first, then louder until it filled the space around her. The children cheered, clapped, and some even jumped with excitement. Adults smiled, some nodding in appreciation, some whispering words of praise to each other. The girl's small chest swelled with pride and joy, her eyes shining as she realized what she had accomplished. She had transformed the laughter of doubt into admiration and respect. The cafe owner came outside again, smiling warmly. He knelt beside her and told her that she had a special gift, a talent that deserved to be shared. He encouraged her to keep playing, offering the piano whenever she wished. His words were kind and sincere, and they filled her with hope. She nodded, feeling grateful and excited. She had found a place where she belonged, where her music was valued and appreciated. The piano had become her voice, her friend, and her path to a brighter future. As she packed her small bag to leave, she looked around at the faces of the crowd. Some held coins, others only their smiles and applause. She did not care about the money. It was the recognition and respect that mattered. She had learned that her music could touch hearts, and that her dreams were worth pursuing. The children who had laughed before now looked at her with admiration, some whispering to their friends about the girl who could play the piano so beautifully. She smiled softly, feeling a quiet happiness that warmed her entire being. The rest of the day passed quickly. She helped her family with chores, ran errands, and kept the melody in her mind, humming it softly whenever she could. She imagined herself playing in larger places, sharing her music with more people, and making them feel the same joy she felt. The thought filled her with determination, a sense of purpose that she had never known before. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she also knew that she had discovered a power within herself that could not be taken away. That evening, she sat quietly in her small home, her fingers moving as if they were playing an invisible piano. She remembered the faces of those who had listened, the silence that had followed her last note, and the applause that had filled her with joy. She felt a sense of accomplishment and hope, knowing that her music could create change, even in a small corner of the world. She imagined the future, stages and audiences, music filling the air, and she felt a spark of possibility that made her heart race. As she lay down to sleep, the melodies she had created the day before and the day-to-day played softly in her mind. She thought about the piano, the people, and the streets that had become her stage. She realized that she had found her voice, something that could not be silenced by laughter or doubt. She closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of peace and excitement for what was to come. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new melodies, but she was ready. She had music, courage, and hope, and they were enough to guide her forward. She drifted to sleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of songs that had not yet been played and a life full of possibilities. The sun was just rising when the girl left her small home, a sense of excitement and nervousness stirring in her chest. She had played on the street piano for several days now, and each day had brought new recognition and confidence. Today felt different. She had been approached by a kind man, a local musician, who had offered to help her learn more about music. He had seen her talent and wanted to give her lessons, guidance that she had never had before. Her heart raced at the thought of learning properly, of discovering all the things she could do with her music. She ran to the cafe, her small bag bouncing against her side, eager to reach the piano before the streets became busy. The old piano looked just as it had every day, its worn keys waiting for her touch. She took a deep breath, placing her fingers gently on the keys. The first notes were soft, deliberate, like a greeting to an old friend. Then she began to play, letting her imagination guide her fingers, building on the melodies she had been creating in her mind. Her confidence had grown, and her music was richer, stronger, and more expressive than ever. People began to gather, drawn by the sound. As always, the children from the neighborhood came first, wide-eyed and whispering, some tapping their feet to the rhythm. Adults appeared from windows and doorways, stopping to listen, amazed at how a small girl could create music that felt so full of life. The girl did not notice them, for she was completely absorbed in her playing. The piano was her voice, her way to communicate what she could not put into words. Each note carried her hopes, her struggles, and her dreams. As she continued, the local musician arrived quietly, watching from a distance. He observed her movements, the way her small fingers danced across the keys, and the emotion in her playing. He saw potential, a raw talent that could grow into something extraordinary. He decided to wait until she had finished, allowing her to perform fully on her own. The girl felt the music in her chest, guiding her hands, helping her tell a story that was entirely hers. She added small improvisations, playing with freedom, letting her feelings shape the sound. The melody rose and fell like waves, capturing the attention of everyone around. The children who had laughed at her before were now silent, their expressions filled with admiration. They whispered to each other, amazed at what they were seeing. Even the adults who had been skeptical began to smile and nod, some whispering to each other, sharing their wonder at the small girl's music. Her fingers moved faster now, more confidently, producing notes that were full of life and emotion. The crowd felt the story she was telling through the keys, a story of courage, determination, and hope. They were captivated, unable to turn away from the music. When she reached the climax of her piece, the music swelled, powerful yet gentle, carrying the full depth of her emotions. Her fingers danced across the keys, creating sound that seemed to fill the street, rising and falling in perfect harmony. People felt the intensity of her music, and some had tears in their eyes, moved by the honesty and beauty of her playing. The children clapped softly to keep the rhythm, while adults nodded and whispered words of praise. It was more than entertainment. It was a performance that touched hearts. As the final notes faded, a quiet silence filled the street. No one moved for a moment, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started softly, then grew louder, echoing through the neighborhood. The children cheered, some jumping with excitement, and the adults clapped and smiled. The girl felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride, joy, and relief. She had done it. She had shared her music fully, and it had been received with admiration and respect. The local musician approached, kneeling beside her with a kind smile. He told her that she had a rare gift, something worth nurturing and developing. He offered to teach her, to help her grow her talent into something greater. The girl nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. This was a new beginning, a chance to learn, to improve, and to dream bigger than ever before. She had discovered that her music could change the way people felt, and now she could learn to do even more. In the following weeks, the girl began to take lessons with the musician. She learned about scales, rhythms, and new techniques, and her skills grew rapidly. Each day she practiced on the street piano, but now her playing was sharper, more confident, and more expressive. The people in the neighborhood continued to gather, watching her grow, offering smiles, applause, and encouragement. She felt proud, not just of her talent but of the effort and dedication she had shown. The laughter of the past had been replaced by admiration, and she had earned it through her perseverance. As her skills improved, she began to dream of performing in larger places. She imagined stages with bright lights, audiences clapping and cheering, and her music reaching far beyond the streets she had known. The thought filled her with excitement and determination. She practiced diligently, knowing that her talent was a gift, but her hard work would turn it into something extraordinary. She felt the support of the community, the encouragement of the musician, and the pride of her own achievements. All of this gave her the courage to dream bigger than she ever had before. One day, a local charity that supported young musicians invited her to play at a small concert. She was nervous but excited, knowing this was her chance to reach new people with her music. The streets, the piano, and the familiar faces had prepared her for this moment. She arrived at the concert hall, her small frame dwarfed by the stage, but her heart full of confidence and hope. As she began to play, the audience was captivated by the purity and emotion in her music. Her fingers moved with precision and feeling, telling a story that touched everyone in the room. The applause at the end of her performance was overwhelming. People cheered and clapped, moved by the talent and passion of the young girl who had once been laughed at on the streets. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment and joy. This was more than she had ever imagined. She had transformed her dreams into reality, and she knew that this was only the beginning. She had discovered the power of her music, the strength of her determination, and the importance of believing in herself. Returning home that evening, she felt a quiet pride and happiness. The streets where she had first played, the piano that had become her friend, and the people who had once laughed were now part of her journey, memories that gave her strength. She knew that her life had changed forever. She had learned that talent, courage, and persistence could overcome doubt and mockery. She had discovered that her music could touch hearts, and that her dreams were worth pursuing no matter the obstacles. That night, as she lay in bed, she imagined all the possibilities ahead. She thought about the stages she would play on, the people she would inspire, and the music she had yet to create. She felt a deep sense of peace and hope, knowing that she had found her voice and that it would guide her through life. The laughter that once tried to stop her had become a distant memory, replaced by the applause, encouragement, and admiration of everyone who had witnessed her courage and talent. She drifted to sleep with a smile, dreaming of songs that would fill the world with beauty and hope, ready to face whatever came next with music in her heart.